Hello there, digital world. Welcome back once again to another episode of Spliced In Later. It's that time again. It's time for me to bring you another movie review of a movie that is available in the cinemas that you can go out and see to pass the time as your life ticks ever closer to its end. Bit of a morbid start, went off the rails there. Let's pull it back on track. This is one that I have been hotly anticipating since its announcement, since its confirmation of this year, counting down the months. And I can definitely know that a lot of people, if you are listening, are on board with me about this one. It's from the areas that I love the most when it comes to movies: superheroes, Marvel, animation, emotion, and humor. And it's got it all. And I can happily say that after a lot of apprehension, there was no need for me to worry. It is bloody fantastic, and I can't wait to talk about it with you. Today here on Spliced In Later, as we continue our reviews of all the movies that are hitting the box office for the summertime in America, we are reviewing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, an animated Spider-Man adventure, which is a sequel to the huge hit that was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that came out at the end of 2018. Bit of backstory on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse before we get into this one, just in case you're not aware. If for some reason you're listening to this and you have no intention of watching either of these movies, but you want some context, unpacking for you, Spider-Man's rights are not owned by Marvel Studios. They are owned by Sony. So every now and then Sony does some of its own movies to hold on to the Spider-Man rights. In live action, can't do a Spider-Man movie. It has to do weird, sometimes okay, sometimes terrible movies based on his villains. But they can make an animated Spider-Man film. So that's exactly what they did. And they jumped on the bandwagon that was huge for Spider-Man, especially during the 2010s, which was the concept of a Spider-Verse, a multiverse of all these different Spider-Men and women and pigs and cats and dinosaurs and all of that, all teaming up to fight threats and all of that stuff. The animated movie went in a different direction because at that point there's been a lot of Spider-Man movies. I think a lot of people were sort of, if you're not a huge Spider-Man fan, you'd be of the belief that another Spider-Man movie. We literally had one last year. We're gonna have another one next year. We've had 3 different versions of Spider-Man. How can we keep doing the same thing over and over again? So for this animated film, went in a different direction, instead focusing on the very popular comic book character Miles Morales, the Spider-Man from the Ultimate Universe in the comics. Miles is a young kid from Brooklyn. So, don't tell me exactly how he gets his powers in the comics. In the movie, he was able to get them after he was bit by a robot spider, and then his own Spider-Man was killed by the Kingpin. He was voiced by Shameik Moore, and in that movie, as he embraced the powers and the responsibility of being Spider-Man while dealing with a very overprotective, overbearing father and a very caring but slightly intense mother, he realized the multiverse was being threatened by fractures in all of that, meaning that other Spider-Men and women were falling through into his universe. So while he becomes Spider-Man, he also gets to team up with some rather kooky characters, including Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy, the Spider-Woman of her world, who had Peter B. Parker, voiced by Jake Johnson, who was the schlubby, pathetic Spider-Man, a very different Peter Parker to the one we know. Then you had a Spider-Man from a detective noir universe, a Spider-Girl who had a robot Spider-Man suit, and a Spider-Pig, Spider-Ham, who was essentially from a Looney Tunes world. And they all had to team up and save the day. Seems like a silly movie, and there was a lot of humor, a lot of craziness in there. But there was something about that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie which just resonated with everybody and just was a massive success both critically and commercially. If you were a big Spider-Man fan, you would have got everything you wanted that you want from the Spider-Man world on the big screen. You get your Easter eggs, your references, your favorite characters, your allusions to other Spider-Man and other IPs. But if you'd never seen Spider-Man, or if you were a bit sick of Spider-Man, you got something else. You got a genuinely heartfelt, emotional movie. There's a lot of silly gags, very funny stuff. It's not silly for just silly sake. It's genuine, clever, 4-4 breaking humor. But at the heart of it was this young kid, Miles, who was sort of thrust into being Spider-Man, wasn't really prepared for it. Learning to come into his own, to be his own hero, not just to copy other people, to forge his own identity, and to push through some emotional barriers that he had with his own family. Combined with an incredible animation style, which sort of broke new ground, and a lot of other movies are sort of trying to capture that essence. Puss in Boots recently did it very, very, very well, with a sense of comic book paint strokes. It's sort of the animation kind of pops off the screen, has a liveliness to it that you don't see in standard animation that you get from, say, something like Shrek or Encanto or anything like that. And powerful soundtrack, a really intense final battle with emotion and comedy and all of that. Just a great time for everyone involved. And clearly it resonated with a lot of people because it took home the Academy Award for Best Animated Film that year. If people ever say to you, no superhero film, no Marvel film has ever won an Academy Award, you can say, well, you are wrong. I don't know why they would ever come up in conversation, but just in case, you are prepared. Naturally, very successful, so there's going to be a sequel. And then as the sequel was getting announced and getting ready, that's when I had my anxiety for this one, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, because it seemed like it was going to fall into that trap that most sequels do once something is an unexpectedly large hit, which is we have to go bigger, we have to increase everything that everyone loved about the first one tenfold, we have to go bigger, bonkers, more characters, more voice actors. We have to do the new trend that's come on recently, which is to have our movies as not just planned for a sequel, but a series of films. Starts off as like we can do a Spider-Verse 2 and 3 and then spin-offs. Then it's I will do a Spider-Verse Part 1 and a Spider-Verse Part 2. Meaning you have that anxiety of, okay, it's going to be one of those movies that you won't get the resolution to in the first half, maybe. How will they do that? Because it's not easy to make a Part 1, Part 2 movie. Recently I reviewed Fast and Furious, and though I really liked Fast 10, the movie does just sort of stop. Very rarely does a Part 1 movie resolve in a way that leaves you with a cliffhanger wanting more, but still lets you feel like you've watched an actual first act of a movie and the rug hasn't been pulled out from under you, a la Desolation of Smaug or something like that. And then the trailers are coming out and it's just oodles and oodles and oodles of Spider-Man from the video game, Spider-Man from the animated TV shows, the Japanese show, spider dinosaurs and horses and cats of all kinds. And you do sort of go, okay, is this too much? But I should have known that I clearly have no idea what makes a good movie, really. You should never judge a book by its cover, never judge an egg before it's hatched or something. You know what I mean? Clearly the people behind it knew what they were doing, because holy moly, was that a great movie that I just watched. The movie's over 2 hours. It is a Part 1 movie, but it was just awesome. It's going to be hard for me to describe it because I really don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but it moved along at a rollicking pace. Every act in the story flowed into the other one. There was nothing jarring about it. It was intense. As the movie started, I realized I hadn't gone to the bathroom before I went into the movies, and that's the worst decision I could ever do, because if I ever need to pee, it's really hard for me to focus on a movie. And I could feel at the start, as everything was kicking off, I was like, oh no, I do actually need to pee already, and I've got a whole movie to get through. This is gonna suck. And then by the end of the movie, I suddenly remembered, oh, that's right, I need to pee. I was so enraptured by what I was watching and having such a good time that the need to urinate was completely driven from my mind. To give you the bare bones basics of what this movie sort of is about, because again, I can't talk too much about it really, we basically pick up right where Into the Spider-Verse left off, albeit a year later. So you got Miles Morales, he's fully become Spider-Man, he's working with his father, even though his father doesn't know he's Spider-Man. He's very popular in Brooklyn, he's doing great, but he's having trouble balancing being Spider-Man with his home life. And his parents are very, very suspicious of what he is doing, and they don't know why, and there's a communication breakdown as a result of that. He keeps letting them down. He keeps being late for parties and appointments and things, and he can't explain why, and that frustration turns to anger and all of that stuff, which is hard enough when you're a teenager without having to hide that you are Spider-Man. On top of that, a new supervillain has appeared called the Spot, a very unique supervillain voiced by Jason Schwartzman, who insists on being Spider-Man's nemesis, even though Spider-Man has no idea who he is or even really considers him a threat. But the Spot can make spots that can originally teleport, but then allow him to teleport to go into alternate multiverse dimensions and all of that stuff. On the other side of that, we also pick up the story with Gwen Stacy. She was the Spider-Gwen of the first movie, Miles' best friend in that movie. Most likely, it's going to evolve into a more romantic thing. You can definitely tell that they both pine for each other, even though they're in different universes, and they cannot really see each other because Spider-Man aren't supposed to hop from universe to universe. She's got her own stuff going on with her origin story and her father's relationship with Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman, which is nowhere near as good as you would hope it to be. During an adventure she's suddenly recruited into the Spider Society, which is helmed by Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara, voiced by Oscar Isaac, who has essentially formed a society of spider people whose job it is to go through the Spider-Verse, through the multiverse, and fix the anomalies that have resulted as a result of the first movie. Things have fractured, supervillains and other people have been thrown into the wrong universes, and they all have to go around and catch them and send them home. It's quite a large society. There's a lot of Spider-Man, but a lot of them are just background, hey, I know you sort of characters, except for a core few. You've got a Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, voiced by Issa Rae, who's pretty badass. Spider-Punk, voiced by Daniel Kaluuya, who's like a British rock star, who's like, screw the system. An Indian Spider-Man, who's quite funny, voiced by Karen Sony. Spider Hologram, a very intense Scarlet Spider, and a few others scattered about here and there. Peter B. Parker is back as well, and he's got himself a little kid. He's very irresponsible. He takes that kid into battles with him, but it's also cute and funny. So those two stories collide once the Spot becomes a large enough problem for the Spider Society to get involved. Gwen originally shows up to deal with that with Miles, and then it spirals into a whole thing where Miles ends up jumping through the Spider-Verse on adventures with all the other different Spider-Men. The crook of the matter is that for some reason Miguel O'Hara does not want Miles involved or in any way, and really hates him. And that's the underlying mystery: is how is this all connected? Why is Miles not being included in the Spider Society? Why is the Spot such a big deal? What's going on with anomalies? How does that affect all the different Spider-Men? And also an issue called Canon Events, which I won't really get into. You'll just have to watch the movie to explain. If you hear scurrying behind me, as usual, because I'm recording a podcast, my cats have decided it's time to be insane. Thank you, Winston. Love ya. Love your work. So that's about it. I don't want to go too much more into the plot. What I've really liked about the trailers is they've been very vague about what the movie is actually about. And I really think it's best for people to go into this with no idea, like I did, because then you can be genuinely interested and intrigued by how the story unfolds. And you'll get a lot of twists and turns and surprises. I can't fault this movie in any way. I find nothing wrong with it. It's a perfect score from me, easily a 10 out of 10. As good as the first Into Spider-Verse movie, if not better. First off, the characters. Obviously, Shameik Moore's back as Miles. He's our heart. He's our main character. He's the protagonist that we follow in here. I really like his evolution from the first movie, where he's become very confident in being Spider-Man, but it's still a complete mess when he's trying to be a normal kid. It's a very accurate depiction of a teenager who isn't talking with their parents and thinks they're invincible and all of that stuff, but with the of course the added issue of the spider secret. He goes through quite the railroad of emotions and shock in this thing, and through it all he is very emotional, very confident, keeps his quirky sense of humor, and I loved him. Haley Steinfeld's Gwen also got a much larger role in this film. She's essentially the co-lead. So her story is just as important as Miles's, and we stick with her a lot in how her story unfolds, as well as Miles. And again, Haley Steinfeld kills it, voicing her, and I really love the relationship between the two. It's a very sweet, very emotional, quite cute thing that they've got going on, where clearly they're very into each other and they really care for each other deeply. But of course, being teenagers, they don't know how to voice it. There's misunderstandings. There's unwarranted feelings of betrayal in certain instances. But even something as cute as them just hanging out in a New York skyscraper, sitting upside down, with Miles doing the classic, am I going to hold her hand or not? It's all very sweet. Although I will say, I find it hard to believe that anybody, even if you're a spider person, can sit upside down and have a conversation, because their blood rushes to my head so fast when I even consider sitting upside down. So, I don't know, I guess maybe being Spider-Man, your blood's different and it doesn't bulge in the back of your eyeballs when you're sitting upside down. The other big characters in here, you've got a very intense Spider-Man 2099 voiced by Oscar Isaac, he's like a vampire ninja Spider-Man. He's very serious, he's very violent, he's quite scary, and Oscar Isaac really sells that, where you don't hate him, but you keep your distance. If you were in the Spider Society and you were aware of him, you wouldn't want to be alone in a room with him. A lot of what he's doing is over the top, misguided. He is essentially sort of the main villain of the film. The Spot's there. The Spot is the big danger. But the way Miguel Axon behaves, by the end of the film, you're like, this guy is kind of the antagonist. Even though he's not a typical antagonist, he's definitely something that Miles needs to overcome during this movie. Jason Schwartzman's Spot is very silly. Classic Jason Schwartzman style delivery of comedy, until he becomes a big enough threat. And even then, he still retains that sort of dorky scientist who doesn't know quite how to be a supervillain or how to be menacing. He's menacing by accident, by a association with the powers that he has, because the powers are so intense. So he's lucky to be a supervillain threat, but his mannerisms don't speak to that, which is interesting. We've also got Daniel Kaluuya as Spider-Punk. He was my standout favorite character in the movie. He's a edgy Spider-Man carrying his guitar, who's like, fuck the system, encouraging Miles to break away and be his own man and question Miguel's whole thing. Truly loved it. Thought it was great. Indian Spider-Man, also great. I cannot say his name because I'm pretty sure I'll butcher it, but he was lovely. He was the classic, like, yes, another successful mission for your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Delivery of that was just perfect. The animation again is top notch, but it goes even further in this film, because when you go into different Spider-Verse universes, the animation style changes, and not just subtly, quite radically. If you're overwhelmed by a lot of things happening on the screen, you might find it hard to adjust in the beginning. Your eyes might be going, Jesus, okay, what's happening here? But if you appreciate good animation, especially if you watch a lot of Disney films, or animation films in general, you will appreciate how, for instance, Gwen's universe, her backgrounds are like paint strokes, and they change. Like one scene, it'll be all blue, and then it will be all white. And it seems to change depending on the mood of the character you're focusing on. So if Gwen is upset, it's all dark and broody and menacing. When she's happy, it has a nice warm glow to it, which is nice. And then you've got, like, there's a Lego world, so it's stop motion. There is a pop art comic book style pages, flip off the walls sort of thing. And that's just to name a few. There's plenty of variety to the animation, and it's all unique, and it pops off the screen just like the first one. Very meta, very 4:4 breaking style of animation presentation as well. If someone says a term, and the movie feels it needs to explain that term to you, it'll pop up in like a little box with an asterisk that explains it, kind of like a comic book. And then people's thoughts are projected in words as well on the screen. All these little things, which are just, at the end of the day, huge homages to the art of the comic book and how it has helped to tell these stories in unique and interesting ways. No two comics are the same, really. Every artist has their own style, their own way of telling stories. And I think that's what's so great about comic books, and what people who, if they've ever turned their nose up and it's like, oh, comic books, people should read the Bible, a good book. You get what I mean. The idea that a comic book is for children, incorrect. And this movie will demonstrate that to you. Just like the first one, the emotion in here as well, though. There's some really powerful, intense scenes. Kids will like it because it's Spider-Man. But this is probably more an animated film for adults, just because they'll appreciate, if you're a parent, seeing that on screen, the demonstration of a relationship between a kid and a parent and how that unfolds. If you've ever been in a high school crush, you'll see that demonstrated with Miles and Gwen. And then the core of this being the fixed point that every Spider-Man has ever been through, which is that there's always been a terrible tragedy which has defined them. In most Spider-Man cases, it's Uncle Ben, but for Gwen's world, it's her Peter died. In the first one, Miles lost his uncle, that sort of thing. The idea that these spider people are doomed to be miserable, to have miserable things happen to them because it is a core part of them being Spider-Man, and Miles's attempts to break away from that and to not live in despair and misery is a truly interesting way to take the story. And I realized watching it that this is the best story to tell in a Spider-Verse style story of all these different Spider-Men. It's always been, regardless of how happy they are, something terrible always happens to them. And why is that the case? Even Tom Holland in the recent MCU Spider-Man films, he lost Aunt May finally in No Way Home. So no one seems to escape it. And Miles' desperation to make sure he doesn't lose someone important to him is the driving force of the film. As I said, it's a part 1 movie, so it does not finish the story. But unlike Fast 10, it sort of wraps itself up in terms of finishing the first arc of the story, as it were. It doesn't finish with someone like saying something and then it just goes credits to be continued. You get a sense of where each character is and what they're going to do next. And that's the perfect way for a cliffhanger for a part 1 movie. Miles may be down, but he's not out. Gwen has a plan to do something. This final big twist of the movie is going to be very important going forward. It's not just the villain that we were fighting, he's going to punch me now. No, something that completely shifts the film into a completely different direction happens, and then the movie ends. So when part 2 begins, it will be a different movie and it will take a different direction. So hands down to you across the Spider-Verse. You did what few movies can do, and you made a perfect part 1 ending to a film that allows me to be anticipating the next one, which luckily comes out in March, so we don't have that long to wait. Look, in case you didn't notice, at the end of the day, this is my favorite film of the year, so by a large mile, and I think it'll be interesting if any movie can top this one this year. It's definitely one of the best Spider-Man movies ever made, one of the best superhero movies ever made, one of the best animated movies ever made by far. If you are a Spider-Man fan, you will love this so much. I can't even begin to describe it to you. I saw this with a mega Spider-Man fan. He loved every single second of it. Your brain will explode with all the Easter eggs that you see, especially when they arrive in the Spider Society and you've got all the different Spider-Mans, all the different villains, all the different references to movies, TV shows, comic book arcs, weird adaptions in other countries, all of that stuff. You're going to have a good time, and most likely your favorite Spider-Man characters will get a role in here that you will love and appreciate. If you have never seen Spider-Man and you don't know if you'd like this because it is huge with all the Spider-Men, you watch the trailer and you go, Jesus, I don't know if I can handle that. I promise you that is a small part of what this movie actually is and what it presents to you. And I think even if you hadn't seen the first Into the Spider-Verse, you could go into this one, understand what's going on, have a good time, and probably be emotionally moved, and be ready and excited to watch the next one. So I recommend it for everybody, but of course, especially Spiderheads. But I don't think I need to say that. If you're a Spiderhead, you've probably already seen it, and you're just listening to other reviews now just to hear people agree with you. Well, I agree with you. It was a fantastic movie, 10 out of 10. I may watch it again really soon. There, well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed. It's really nice when I actually get to really talk about how much I love something rather than be negative. That may be the case though next week when I review Transformers Rise of the Beast. I can't believe I'm going to go see another Transformers movie. I thought we were done. I don't know why I'm seeing it. As always, I'm a hopeful optimist, so we'll see. Between now and then though, because that'll be a late in the week sort of thing, I'll probably give you another episode. Not sure on what yet. I'm sure I'll make up my mind when the time comes. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. And please, go see this movie. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Great time. Loved it. Fantastic. Until next time, be safe, be kind, love one another. I'll catch you on the next Spliced In Later. Adios, muchachos.